In this episode, we look how the aspect ratio transforms the meaning of an entire photograph. Greetings! I'm Rodger Newbold, the host of Experience Photography's video vlog number 58 in today's presentation. My partner, my great friend, and editor for this episode is Mr. Matt Rich, photographer extraordinaire. Are you in the command pod, my friend? Did they let you go out of the hospital? I certainly hope you're okay.
Coming!
You know, our desire with these vlogs is to provide information that we fumbled through in a twirling days. A couple of years ago, when we began this educational effort, our desire was to pass on tools, techniques, and information that we fumbled with through our earlier days, in the days now that we don't have to sputter on and spiral down the tube. Often helping you in your quest. Over our many years, Matt and I have used, many different camera systems. We benefited from each of their advantages, and we hobbled through a lot of their weaknesses. Remembering the giant wooden view camera series, oh yes, with dark cloths dangerously draped over our heads to glimpse the dim upside down and backwards images that only an f8 lens can be projected on an etched glass. Left us totally vulnerable, never knew what was going on around you. We peered down through and into smaller, squared up medium format cameras. We did all of our due diligence in the darkroom. We clunked about curiously. We fulfilled all of this long before the amazing freedom that the digital revolution afforded us as it finally won the day. We do hope that our experience can provide some help to all in our experimenting with different aspect ratios as furnished by different cameras, and they did for us, and we can help you. Do you agree, my friend, that we learned some valuable lessons?
Oh, absolutely. I started out with 35 millimeter, shot hundreds of frames with that, carrying that camera everywhere. I saved up money and finally bought a Hasselblad and shot square format for quite a while. And then eventually bought a wooden 4x5 camera, and it was big and heavy, and I'd set it down, and I had a card like this that I would carry around and find the different compositions depending on the lenses that I had. It was a wonderful experience of learning in the field how to create a composition that would fit the camera that you had.
An aspect ratio is the dimension of an image shape expressed in a ratio form. You determine the aspect ratio by comparing an image's width with its height and writing it as a ratio of width to height, such as 3:2 or 4:5. Here's a very important note, though. An aspect ratio does not indicate any particular size, specific, or numeric thing. It only denotes a shape. Now, the aspect ratio of your image is initially determined by the dimension of your camera's sensor, because the image sensor, their dimensions are fixed. The actual images produced will always be produced in a given shape. This shape may later be given in a measurable size. You know, a 35 millimeter film or digital camera has a 3:2 aspect ratio, which is the size of 36 by 24. That is, in today's marketplace, may be the most common of all aspect ratios. The 4/3 style camera, along with many point and shoot cameras, sport a 4:3 ratio. The view camera, or the wooden styled field cameras, were built with a 4:5 aspect ratio. And even though we used an 8x10 inch size camera, the film was 8x10 inches. The camera aspect ratio is still 4:5. This also translates into, common sizes of 8x10 for very popular for portraits. And when I was working in England, I found they always described the same camera aspect ratio, only in the landscape format. So it was always known as the 5x4. Didn't matter, same-o, same-o. Now, particularly in the 1940s and 50s, the 2¼ by 2¼ inch 120 film size square format cameras were very, very popular. Many medium format cameras still use this 1:1 format ratio. Currently, several of the medium format digital cameras available, say like the Hasselblad X2D, utilizes a 4:5 aspect ratio. And now they pack up to 100 megapixels on them. Amazing. With recognition to Mr. Tim Gilbraith, we can inspect an image with many different size ratios, and he's indicated this for us in his illustration, and we thank you, sir, for doing so. An easy explanation for full frame 35, which measures 36 by 24 millimeters, can be expressed as 36 by 24. But, those mathematicians are always trying to simplify it, try to get the two numbers down as small as they can. And both of them are divisible by 12, so they call it 3:2 ratio. The 4:3 ratio, take a look at that. It's the same as the old TV and video monitors. It has a taller, slimmer look that appears almost squarish to the eye, and it's a good creative choice when you need to capture, vertical elements of a scene. The 5x4 or 4x5 is primarily used in large format because of the size of the film is actually 4x5 inches. From a creative standpoint, images use this ratio almost as tall as they are wide, and they're really good for capturing, elements of a vertical scene. Now, you will likely observe that the aspect ratio affects the amount of negative space found within your image. Negative space is the area around the subject, and different ratios provide varying amount of negative space and thus affect the entire overall feel of a photograph. Techniques like the rule of, let's not say that, the suggestion of thirds or leading lines may be adapted and based on an aspect ratio. For instance, a wide aspect ratio might require you to think more about horizontal lines, while a tall aspect ratio may force you to think more about vertical lines. Understanding how aspect ratios affect composition and how they may make you have intentional choices when framing your shots. This in turn ensures that your images convey the desired message and aesthetic. Your aesthetic vision plays a significant role in choosing an aspect ratio. You know, you have to experiment with ratio to see which one fits and aligns and becomes part of your style. Some photographers really just like the 3x2, while others may lean towards the more modern cinematic 16:9. Choosing the right aspect ratio for your photos. Well, these are some common aspect ratios, and of course, you need to know how to use them for the best result. And if you don't find a pre-select, well, make something up that fits and works for you. The first image I'm showing here is a JPEG copy of the raw file of a photograph of Mount Hayden that I shot in the Grand Canyon. It is just the standard 3x2 aspect ratio from my Canon digital camera without any enhancements. It's a dull, standard, raw, that just directly fell out of the bottom of the camera. Not a lot of glory, but a ton of potential. Now, photograph 2 is a screenshot of the 3x2 ratio, and I've done my typical vibrance layer. I added a little bit to the stack, and the vibrance provides greater snap, contrast. Within the same control box, we also adjusted saturation up about 10 points to make it a little more colorific, as Ansel would have said. In picture number 3, it's an enlarged 3x2 version of picture 2. Anybody could be happy with this. The composition's attractive. It's nestled in its own aspect ratio of 3x2, and everybody's happy. Now, let's take a look at what happens when we decide to change it to a square aspect ratio. Every photographed aspect ratio features a different way of viewing the world. Therefore, within the same picture, the aspect ratio emphasis may introduce a whole different opinion about what it looks like to the viewer. The audience may gain a new attitude to that very same picture. Well, is the square format better than wide? Absolutely not. It's not better. It's not worse. It's just different. It's easy to crop in post-production, and you can get to a square by selecting a crop of 1:1. However, many of the modern cameras do offer a 1:1 aspect ratio right in their menu, and you can actually see the effect of a square crop while you're shooting. And in a raw mode, the former detail will still be preserved, just in case you have a mind shift later. Square format doesn't get much respect, not these days. For example, Michael Freeman devotes only 4 paragraphs in his book on photographic design, The Photographer's Eye. He considers the square unsympathetic and it's just formal rigidity. Well, that's one man's opinion. And none of this is gospel, so don't treat it like that. It's not a forbidden rule. Square format is stable, more so than a rectangular. It's a good match for inanimate or serene subjects, architecture, or posed formal portraiture, maybe flowers, or still lifes, abstracts. Even landscapes can exist in a square format. Geometrics work particularly well. Anything that's a circle or a square or a triangle, they're just naturals to fit into a square frame. Symmetrical subjects also can be comfortable home inside a square. Now, find the tool that works. It might be weakened by superfluous background information. Simply cropping that photograph into a square, it may strengthen it. Square images can also make some very interesting diptychs or triptychs. A panoramic image might work as a series of 2 or 3 all put together in square formats up on the wall. Looks good. In photograph number 4, the 1-to-1 aspect ratio, the square image shifts the pictorial prominence from that of the Grand Canyon to a stable and majestic peak of Mount Hayden. The complete feel and importance of the image has changed. Now, photo 5 shows how I got there. If you remember, tap the K key, you can pause and review, tap the K key again and go on. All of that secret data is there so you can see how I did it. I seem to have a penchant for slightly elongated aspect ratios in my work. Take a peek at number 6. You'll appreciate the 16:9 elongation. Now, this is not wholly a panoramic, but it is superior in emphasizing horizontal flow of a landscape. It seems to be more modern, more cinematic, more up-to-date in today's marketplace. And here's how we got there. Take a peek at 7. Thank you. Is there too much cropping? Is it as it occurs? Can it deteriorate from a photograph? Well, yes and no. A long panoramic may prove stunning in one instance, but in this particular picture, I believe it was too much lost in the feel of the canyon. You'll have to decide for yourself, but number 8 shows it in a true 3-to-1 panoramic ratio. In photograph number 9, oh, sorry, John Lennon. The true panoramic aspect is shown. When you finally discover that magic aspect ratio for your particular image, then let the wizard go wild. Let him loose. In number 10, you can see the 12:5 sepia tone version that I came up with. I feel that this ratio, the canyon, indeed does feel grand. Experimentation always requires an investment in time. Nonetheless, when the magic happens and we have ascertained a look that we like, who's to argue? Here's the ladder and how I got to it in photo number 11. If you prefer, you can always run a secondary software package like Color Effects to make something more glowy and showy. Take a peek at number 12. Same aspect ratio, just a different handling and treatment. To generate a panoramic image, a photographer can use a normal lens and crop to a specific aspect ratio in post-production, as we have been showing here. A second method is to use a wider angle lens for the presentation, perhaps say a 16 on a 35 millimeter 2:3 aspect ratio. Now, that's pretty cool. But a third method to achieve a high resolution panoramic is to take your camera, instead of shooting this way, turn it this way. Shoot several vertical images that slightly overlap each other, and you will, especially if you're on a tripod and in manual mode, you can combine them together in post-production. You can go to the internet and find the links to how to do this if that explanation wasn't enough. As you now know, aspect ratio is a big deal. It drives the intent of a photograph home. Making a precise point, it allows the photographer to make choices of how to compose and how to fit the subject matter into a shapely frame. It's always a good idea to think about aspect ratio while you're shooting, and then, if necessary, adjust in post. Avoid issues with aspect ratios when you're printing. It's a good practice to plan your shots with a final print size in mind. Maybe the camera allows you to set an aspect ratio before shooting, which will help. Now, you can always make a non-standard ratio, and you can always have a custom print made. Many professional service labs offer custom sizes that'll match any aspect ratio that you can come up with and ensure that your prints are exactly as you compose them. However, custom sizes can be much more expensive, and they require custom framing. Ka-ching! It's far more realistic to complete your final image and then save it as a new printing file name. Save as image 1. Then open a new document at the desired size of your final print. At that point, all you have to do is drag and drop your new printing name file, whatever it was, image number 1, go to Photoshop in Edit, Transform, Scale, command the fit to attractively fit on the new document size. Shazam! Your picture is now on a standard print size. No extra cost involved. Number 13 shows how I did it. It's really easy. My final image here, or treatment of this image, is a 2:3 aspect ratio laid on the 16-20 inch page. It's all ready to print. This photograph was enhanced along the way in color. I lowered the contrast a bit and added some extra grain to make it resemble a platinum print, to make it feel like an old-time shot of the Grand Canyon that really sets my heart aflutter. Well, over to you guys now at the computer. Does this make sense? Can you reap any benefit from thinking about the final image shape? Will any of this help? Well, we certainly hope so. That's why we did it. Just a thought for you. A man is not finished when difficulties arrive. He is only finished when he quits. So steady on, my friends. People just don't think enough about the final aspect ratio and how it can affect a photograph. And that's what we'd like you to do today. Our time for today has elapsed. And we'd appreciate it if you'd make a new friend and share this information with them. Photograph with greater abandon. Subscribe. give us a big thumbs up. Soar well, my friends. Until we meet here again on screen, you'll tip of my hat to you, and cheerio. Ta-da.